Hey Wisecrack, Jared Incarnate again, and we've got another Wisecrack quick take on this week's Rick and Morty episode, Pickle Rick.
I'm Pickle Rick!
I'm here to answer the question, why does Rick turn into a pickle? And yes, it's partly because Dan Harmon said Rick is a pickle in a writer's room brainstorm.
Harmon just goes, oh, and Rick is a pickle!
And then there's the other easy answer to avoid family therapy. But if you stick with me, I'm going to argue that Rick's being as Pickle can teach us a lot about freedom. Welcome to this Wisecrack quick take on Pickle Rick. And of course, spoilers ahead. But first, a recap. Rick, if you couldn't deduce, has turned himself into a pickle to get out of family therapy. But things go awry and he ends up fighting his way out of a sewer and later a Russian embassy using a mech suit made out of roach parts and rat limbs. Meanwhile, Beth, Summer, and Morty have to go to family therapy after Summer huffed pottery enamel and Morty peed his pants. There's a clever parallel between Beth and Rick in this episode. Just as Rick goes to insane lengths to avoid bearing his emotions in therapy, Beth is doing her best to stonewall her school-appointed therapist and maintain her emotional distance.
I think it's possible that you and your father have a very specific dynamic. I don't think it's one that rewards emotion or vulnerability. I think it may punish them. I think it's possible that dynamic eroded your marriage and is infecting your kids with a tendency to misdirect their feelings.
You.
Mom!
Both of you two.
One thing we've noticed in the season is that there's more emphasis on serialized arcs. In the last episode, Rick is willing to stay in Mad Max land to avoid dealing with his daughter's divorce.
My daughter's going through a divorce and I am not dealing with it in a healthy way at all.
Now, he's literally turned himself into a pickle to run away from reality. And Morty and Summer seem increasingly damaged by their parents' divorce.
I am mad that I can't huff enamel without people assuming it's because my family sucks.
With this continuation, we've noticed a few themes that seem to be slowly developing, one of which is freedom. This quote from Dr. Wong really sets the stage for our discussion.
I think it's because the only truly unapproachable concept for you is that it's your mind within your control. You chose to come here, you chose to talk, to belittle my vocation, just as you chose to become a pickle. Each of us gets to choose.
At first, Dr. Wong's monologue seemed a little strange. After all, how could Rick not understand that he's in control? He can do anything, including turn himself into a pickle.
The reason anyone would do this, if they could, which they can't, would be because they could, which they can't.
But after digging through my notes on the ugliest of existential philosophers, I think Dr. Wong's monologue gets us to something quite insightful. As we all know, Rick doesn't believe in God.
There is no God, Summer. Gotta rip that band-aid off now, you'll thank me later.
And for philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre, godlessness means we are radically free to define our own existence. But instead, we choose to do things based on social pressures, or who we think we're supposed to be, and all kinds of other bullshit. Sartre calls this acting in bad faith. But since we're mortal, there's a fixed amount of choices to make in our lives, what Sartre calls finitude, and each of those choices prevents other choices. Choosing to be a truck driver means choosing not to be a teacher. To deny the importance of our finite choices is another way to act in bad faith. Often we pretend to not have a choice. As West Side Story puts it,
kindly Sergeant Krupke, you gotta understand, it's just our bringing upkey that gets us out of hand. Our mothers all are junkies, our fathers all are drunks. Golly Moses, naturally we're punks.
Essentially, the hoodlums know they're acting like a bunch of little shits, but instead of choosing to be better, they relinquish their choice and blame it on their negligent parents.
That's why I'm so bad.
They just can't help themselves. But what's unique about Rick is that he doesn't deal with finitude. He deals with infinitude.
My access to infinite timelines precludes the necessity of attachment.
Rick has to grapple with the exact opposite of what Sartre proposed, because to call back to season 1,
there's an infinite number of realities, Morty.
Whereas Sartre criticizes the person who won't take responsibility for their choices, Rick thinks he doesn't have to, because he's already made them in all the infinite versions of himself. If Sartre said the human condition was one of finite choices, well, Rick has transcended that human condition with science. But as Dr. Wong suggests, justifying your actions with the multiverse or your godlike intelligence isn't a solution. Because although intelligence can help you make a decision, you still have to make the decision.
The only connection between your unquestionable intelligence and the sickness destroying your family is that everyone in your family, you included, use intelligence to justify sickness.
Despite the fact that Rick is the master of his universe, he paradoxically has yet to come to terms with his own choices. No matter how many versions of Rick Rick exists, nothing can stop the fact that his choices are uniquely his own. Because to quote Dr. Wong,
The only truly unapproachable concept for you is that it's your mind within your control.
in Season 1, Rick straight up tells us how he deals with the infinite choice in the multiverse.
What about the reality where Hitler cured cancer, Morty? The answer is don't think about it.
But, of course, all therapy does is make you think about things. So Rick turns himself into a pickle to avoid choice, or at least the appearance of it. As a helpless, armless pickle, it's not his fault if he can't make therapy, and in that sense, Rick's blatant disregard for his choices, as Sark would say, is acting in bad faith. Speaking of arcs, this ties nicely into what we talked about in the last episode, between Jerry's powerlessness, Morty's resentment of him for that very reason, and the juxtaposition with Rick as an all-powerful madman.
I don't respect therapy because I'm a scientist, because I invent, transform, create, and destroy for a living, and when I don't like something about the world, I change it.
This season is really leading into ideas of agency, and I'm super excited to see what they come up with next. There's one last thing worth noting, but it's probably more of a stretch. You know the common characterization of Freud's work as everything is a penis? Well, I'm convinced someone in their writer's room probably took this loose connection between a phallic object and therapy and went a little wild with it. But if you want to hear more about this, you'll want to check out the Wisecrack podcast, where we're breaking down every new episode of Rick and Morty. Ryan, Alec, and I talk further about all the intricacies of this awesome episode. So check us out on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks a lot for all the support, guys. Thanks for all the recommendations. Thanks for all the feedback. Really appreciate it. See you later.